Hey guys, this is your host Thomas Irie here from On the Hot Podcast. Today, this will be episode 252 for you guys today. And to kick off this week's episode, I'll be sharing my thoughts on the men's NCAA March Madness tournament. I'll be sharing my thoughts on the first two rounds that have taken place from round 64 to 32, my favorite games and my favorite moments that have transpired during March Madness thus far. So we'll start off with round 64, then I'll work our way to round 32. The first game that caught my eye in this round was Duke versus Siena. Duke defeated Siena by a score of 71-65 on Thursday. Now, honestly, I did not have this in my bingo cards of Duke being on the ropes as a number one seed, the heavy favorite to win it all in March Madness, battling against the 16 seed Siena. And my bracket was nearly destroyed day one because if you guys followed the podcast last week, Duke is my overall pick to win it all in March Madness. But this was a crazy game Thursday. And Siena honestly had Duke on the ropes early in the first half. And they were up by 13 heading in the second half of that game. They were firing on all cylinders offensively. They were firing three-point shots in the first half. And they were more physical in the paint. Siena was more physical in the paint than Duke in the first half. But then, as the game went on in the second half, Duke began to wake up and smell the coffee. They began to lock in the second half. Siena was honestly gassed in the second half. You could tell, I don't know why the hell Siena had all five starters play all 40 minutes of the ball game. That's absolutely insane. You got to defend on your rotation at some point in the ball game. I know the circumstances. You want to be the third team in history to be a 16 seed and knock off a 1 seed. But use your rotation. And they clearly did not do that. And the starters were gassed. And honestly, watching this game, I think Siena was honestly one big man away and using their rotation away from possibly being the third team in NCAA history for a 16 seed to knock off a 1 seed. But Cam Boozer for Duke saved the day. He dropped 22 points, had 13 rebounds, proving why he could possibly be the number one overall pick in this upcoming NBA draft. And Duke in round 32 against TCU, I think in the first half, it took them time to get going, but then they woke up in the second half, locked in, looked way more comfortable on the court in the second half against TCU. They defeated them in round 32. Now they're punching their ticket to the Sweet 16 to play St. John in D.C. That's going to be one hell of a matchup, but I think Duke looked very comfortable compared to game 2, compared to game 1, where they pulled away against TCU in the second half and blew them out. So my bracket's still alive. Deep breaths, and hopefully if you're a Duke fan, your bracket survives, but your roster overall gets better with injuries as the tournament goes on. Next game, VCU. Let's talk about it. VCU defeated North Carolina by a score of 82-78 in overtime in round 64. Now, this was a huge comeback from VCU. If you guys followed the podcast last week, I said that was my favorite upset happening in round 64 with VCU defeating North Carolina. And VCU did that, and they had a huge comeback. They were down by 19 points in that game against North Carolina. They rallied all the way back, forced the game to go into overtime, and they won the game in overtime, sending North Carolina home in the first round. 11 seed upsetting a 6 seed in round 64. But Terrence Hill was on one for VCU. He was hot, and you got to go to your most dependable players in March Madness, and Terrence Hill was that guy. And he was a little off in the first half, but then in the second half, he really started to turn it up and lock in. He was 7 for 10 shooting from three-point range and scored 34 points to help VCU defeat North Carolina. And Nick Lewis for VCU also stepped up to the plate, scored 16 points as well, hit 2 clutch free throws in overtime to help VCU have the 6th biggest comeback in March Madness history. That's what March Madness is all about. That's why we tune in. But looking at the future for North Carolina basketball, Hubert Davis, I know by the time this might come out, he might be fired or not. But if he's not, I think his future should definitely be in doubt with the program. Because since Hubert Davis has been hired by North Carolina, he has missed the tournament or has gotten eliminated in the first round 3 times in his 5 seasons spent with the North Carolina Tar Heels. That's unacceptable for a team that thrives and wants to win more hardware and bring it back to North Carolina, win more March Madness national titles. And he's responsible. Hubert Davis is responsible for this collapse against VCU, responsible for the largest blown lead in school's history. And they only went with a 6-man rotation in the second half. Again, you got to use your players. You use them all year long. Use your rotation. You got to go to him at pivotal moments, and he failed to do that. That's why I think they need to move on from him. He's not the answer in North Carolina. The program deserves much more. The fans deserve much more for basketball, but VCU got the big upset in round 64. Ooh, this is another good game. I'm cooking with grease here. Kentucky defeated Santa Clara by a score of 89-84 in overtime. Now, this was a wild second half between Kentucky and Santa Clara. A lot of people out there believe that Santa Clara could have pulled off the upset around 64 against Kentucky, but that wasn't the case. Otega Oweh hit the layup to tie the game with 9 seconds left. This was a wild sequence to close out regulation before we got to overtime. He hit the layup with 9 seconds left, and then Allen Graves for Santa Clara in the clutch hit a 3-point shot to help Santa Clara go up by 3 points with 2.4 seconds left in the ball game. Kentucky had no timeouts. They had to advance the ball up the court quickly, and then they inbounded the ball, and Otega Oweh hit the clutch buzzer beater 3-point shot, basically pulling up from the parking lot, bounced off the backboard, got some backboard help, but as long as it's a bucket, it still helps. And Otega Oweh helped Kentucky push the game into overtime and against Santa Clara. This is what March is all about. And the action overtime between Kentucky and Santa Clara was really good. Otega Oweh hit 2 clutch free throws in overtime as well. He finished the game with 35 points to help Kentucky get past Santa Clara in round 64. And I felt so bad for Santa Clara because honestly, this was a good 7 versus 10 seed matchup, and Santa Clara did everything right to win the game, but they could not finish when it mattered most, especially in the end of regulation with 2.4 seconds left. You really can't do anything with a shot like that, falling from the parking lot, going off the backboard into the hoop. You really can't do anything about that. And I felt so bad because they were seeking their first tournament win since 1996 when Steve Nash was a senior at Santa Clara University. So March is all about the good, the bad, and the heartbreak. I felt so bad for Santa Clara. Cool stat here. All 9 seeds in each region actually defeated the 8 seeds and went undefeated in round 64. I thought that was a pretty cool stat. Now let's advance ourselves to round 32, the second round. So you had Texas defeat Gonzaga by a score of 74-68 Saturday night. Now, in the final 2 minutes of the game, this was a crazy sequence between Texas and Gonzaga. And Texas was up 69-66 with 2 minutes left in the ball game. Nobody could buy a shot for nearly 2 whole minutes in the final sequences of the game. Gonzaga got a dunk to only trail by 1 late in the game, but Texas hit a huge 3-point shot with 14.5 seconds left in the ball game, and then they pushed the ball in transition after a missed 3-point shot by Gonzaga, or missed shot by Gonzaga, actually a turnover by Gonzaga. I'm sorry, a turnover by Gonzaga. Well, actually, I am so sorry. It was a missed 3-point shot. I'm all over the place rethinking about this game, but it was a missed 3-point shot. After that, they went up by 3 with with a few seconds left in the game, but they won 3 games in the last 5 days, and they're advancing themselves to the Sweet 16 as an 11 seed. A lot of people didn't see that happening, but I got to talk about Gonzaga. Gonzaga is a team that actually achieves a lot in the regular season. Don't get me wrong, this program has been along for a long time, since I was in middle school watching March Madness. I'm 27 years of age. But they choke so hard in March, guys. At some point, you got to discuss it. I know not everybody can win it all, and March Madness is one of the hardest tournaments to win a national championship, and eventually we've got to talk about it. And Gonzaga, yes, they had success in March as of late. In the last 10 years, they were runner-ups in 2017. They were runner-ups in 2021. But I'm not sure if this program has a chance to win it all in this landscape of NIL deals. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they win it all next year. Maybe they go on a deep run, Elite 8, Final 4 next year. We'll see. But I'm starting to lose faith in Gonzaga in March. And I think you guys should too. Well, this was one of my favorite games Saturday night. Arkansas defeated High Point by a score of 94-88. Now, Arkansas defeating High Point by a score of 94-88 was one of my favorite games in round 32. And Arkansas had me a little worried because I did pick them as a 4 seed to be in the Final 4. And High Point was just bombing 3-point shots all over the court. They were hot as a forest fire. And they were playing with confidence after their big win as a 12 seed, knocking off a 5th seed. against Wisconsin Thursday around 64. So they were playing with all the confidence in the world. Both teams, Arkansas and High Point, put on a damn show Saturday night. And you expect that because these are some of the best scoring teams in the country. And there was a total of 15 lead changes with 6 ties in this game between Arkansas and High Point. But Arkansas was great in the second half. They were phenomenal. The good and transitional points. And in March, you always need a special player or a closer to help you go on a deep run in March Madness. And I think Arkansas has that because they have SEC Player of the Year, a potential top 5 player that could be picked in the NBA draft. That is Darius Acuff as a freshman guard. He is phenomenal. He put the team on his back, scoring 36 points against High Point around 32. Hit a clutch 3-point shot with a minute to go, and had 2 clutch free throws at the line to help them escape against High Point. And I think Darius Acuff can help Arkansas go on a deep playoff run this year. And they got their hands full against Arizona in the Sweet 16. So we'll see if they have brighter days ahead or their season's going to end in their next matchup. But High Point played their asses off. I want to give them a lot of credit here. They played their asses off, and they got a really good university, by the way. I want to throw that out there. But they played their asses off. Rob Martin, for them, their senior player had 30 points, left it all on the court, and it felt like they should have been higher than a 12 seed. High Point should have been higher than a 12 seed. I think if the committee got that wrong there, they're a really good team. And they have good rotational players, and they have really good guards. I think the future is bright for this program moving forward. I don't think this is the last time you're going to hear a small school like High Point a part of the dance. And honestly, if High Point had a 6'8", 6'10" big man, they honestly could have went on a deep run as far as the Elite Eight as 12 seed. That's how good of a program I think High Point was this year. But I give them credit. But we'll see how far Arkansas could go in the NCAA AA tournament. Well, this was another good one today. St. John defeated Kansas by a score of 65-63. Now, this was if you're a fan of good defensive basketball, especially in the first half, this was your game to follow because St. John and Kansas are some of the best defensive teams in the country and college basketball. And St. John had Kansas on the ropes in the second half. They were up as much as 14 points in the second half. I'm surprised they didn't capitalize on that. I'm surprised they didn't pull away more. But Kansas rallied all the way back in the ball game with 6 to 5 minutes left. Went on a nice, pretty run that helped their chances against St. John to possibly get to the Sweet 16. But I got to have some questionable thoughts. Why did Kansas's coach call fouls 2 to 3 times in the final sequences of the game, and you could not get a defensive stop? You call fouls. It's over 3.9 seconds left in the game. And Dillian Darlin went up the court and drove straight to the basket, straight to the paint, had a game-winning layup. That's why I had a questionable decision. You foul 2 to 3 times, 3.9 seconds left. You don't have any timeouts. You don't get a defensive stand. You're in trouble. Principal's office trouble. And they paid the price for it because that was a buzzer-beater layup to help St. John get to the Sweet 16. But Kansas, I thought in this matchup, they had all the talent in the world. They get over against St. John. I didn't pick that in my bracket, but St. John just had more heart. And Zuby, a former player for Kansas a few years ago, a part of St. John's program, had 18 points, so he got the final laugh against his former program in Kansas. But this is a huge Sweet 16 matchup. I think this is one of my favorite matchups that we're going to see in the Sweet 16. St. John versus Duke. I had that circled in my bracket. And I got Duke winning it all. But the defense of St. John, I would not be surprised if they knock off Duke in D.C. And I would love to go to that game. I'm in the DMV area. But the tickets are just so damn high at Capital One Arena. I would just think you couldn't make money off the Washington Wizards as bad as they've been all year long. So you just up the prices for March Madness and make DMV fans suffer. Starting at $600 a pop. But it's all right. But we'll see what happens between Duke and St. John. And also, St. John gets to the Sweet 16 for the first time since 1999, I believe. And to close out this segment, I got to talk about it. Florida being upsetted by Iowa, losing 73-72. Now, I was honestly impressed by my Florida Gators on Friday because they had a dominant victory against the 16 seed Prairie View, and that was the second largest March Madness victory that they had Friday for the Florida Gators. And you fast forward to Sunday around 60 or 32, Florida versus Iowa. That was the perfect 1 versus 9 seed matchup that fans could have asked for. In this game between Florida and Iowa, there was a total of 5 ties and 9 lead changes. That was a really fun game between the Florida Gators and the Iowa Hawkeyes. But as a Florida Gators fan, I cannot believe that's the way how we went out as the reigning defending national champions. Iowa honestly had Florida out of the rhythm for most of the game. Early in the game, Florida was not alert defensively, and that's why they were down by 12 points, down 51-39, and early in the second half, they were down by 12 points, and they honestly almost pulled off their biggest comeback of the season, trailing by 12 points, but it just wasn't their day at the office in Tampa, Florida, Sunday night. And Alex Condon, Iowa really had Florida out of character because Alex Condon, a leader for Florida, was a part of that national championship run last year. Nearly got himself kicked out of the game, was in a scuffle, and Todd Golden had a run on the player to save one of his best players, a part of the program, Alex Condon, to keep him in the game for the second half and help us, what could have helped us possibly go on a deeper run. But Isaiah Brown, late in the ball game for the Florida Gators, this was the dagger, the beginning of the end. He went 1 for 2 at the free throw line, and at that point, it was 8.9 seconds left in the ball game. Iowa did not call a timeout. They advanced the ball up the court, took their chances, and Florida paid for it, going 1 for 2 at the line because we decided to play half court defense, full court press, you could say, and we left a guy wide open to make the 3-point shot. We left Alvaro for Iowa wide open to make the 3-point shot. And that hurt us because there was only 4 seconds remaining in the ball game. And I'm not sure why the play call was with 4 seconds left. You already called your final timeout. You got to advance the ball up the court. Xavier Lee, guard senior for us, 4 seconds left, pushes the ball all the way up the court. You only got 4 seconds left, so it's a good thing you made it up the court in the first place. But you ran all the way to the damn basket. Did not even attempt to shoot the ball. I wouldn't have been mad if he decided to stop in his tracks, step back, do a pull-up shot. You miss, okay, at least you tried. Ball game's over. You take it from there. But the problem I have is Xavier Lee ran all the way to the basket and did not attempt the shot. By the time you got there, it was only like 1.91 seconds left on the clock. He decided to attempt to pass the ball to Thomas Hughes, and knowing there's 4 seconds left on the clock, you got to use your basketball IQ here to at least attempt the shot. Because if you make the shot, you win the game for the Gators. You were only trailing by 1. You lost 73-72. And this was an out-of-character game. And this is why I was watching the game. And this is why I did not pick Florida to go all the way. I had them in the Final Four, matching up against Duke. Would have been an early rematch from early on in the season. But that's why I said I could not fully invest in Florida winning it all because they were missing a cold-blooded killer as a clutch performer, and that was Walter Clayton III. Of course, he's in the NBA now, missing him more than ever because he helped us in the clutch situations last year in a historic run. And now Iowa has knocked off the reigning defending champions. They go home, and now Iowa advances to the Sweet 16 for the first time since 1999. Travesty if you're a Florida Gators fan. But those are my thoughts on March Madness from rounds 64 and round 32 so far.